G'day you mob, welcome back to an episode of Pete versus Plants. I am Pete and the plants are these guys today. So I wanted to bring these two on to show you one main thing really. I bought these two cuttings and I've talked about it before on the channel as sort of these half moon Albo cuttings. They were single leaf cuttings that I got. They were rooted and I got them from a woman in Adelaide who sold me 4 at the time, and I think I paid about 300 to 400 each. So it was when I was wanting to splurge out on Albos and get some high quality good variegation ones. And as you can see, this one has lived up to expectations and is doing very, very well. They do say so myself. So I'm really happy with this one. The stem looks amazing, really good variegation on it. It is pretty sort of fitty, right? It's 50-50. So this leaf isn't looking that great, but that was the original one that was on the cutting. Now the sister one, and I'm assuming that this was a bubble below this leaf on the same plant, though I haven't done sort of a forensic analysis, but I would imagine so, seeing as they were from the same person and they're showing that same kind of patterning and variegation, but sort of mirror images there. This one's done the opposite, where it has reverted. Dun, dun, dun. So anyway, I was thinking about selling this one, but I'm kind of a bit iffy about it because I feel a bit dodgy handing off something that's reverted, to be honest, and putting a price on it. But I also know, or think at least, that it could be cut back and we might be able to save the variegation on this guy, or at least get better than that, right? It's not too hard to beat 0, but you'll see that it kind of slowly pitted out. This one, I think, had a few specklings. This one had a few little dots, and then the most recent leaf had 0, and I think it is one of those things, it's kind of 3 strikes and you're out. Now the thing that gives me hope, let's get this one out of the way. The thing that gives me potential hope, see if I can dig it out a bit, is that the very first node, the very first node to have popped out of the cutting, I think there was obviously a leaf here that must have been that initial sheath that snapped off. But there is a node right underneath here. I'm not sure if you can see it below my finger. And when I take a close look at that, I can see speckling of white around and over the top of it. And for comparison, trying to find a good example, I might not have one on here. The next node up also looks like it could be potentially have a slight amount of variegation on it, though I'm not really sure. The next one up looks like this. Can I get that in the camera? It's hard to really tell. Anyway, so I talked to the person that had sort of said she was potentially interested in purchasing this, and I said, you know what, I'll make you a deal. I was thinking it's probably worth, if it has completely reverted, 50 to 100 bucks. Again, if it were me buying it, depending on the nodes and if there is any hope whatsoever of being able to chop it and prop it and get some kind of variegation back. But I said to her, I'll tell you what, I'll try and chop it up myself and I'll make a video out of it and we can follow the progression. But if it reverts from reversion, if it shoots out variegation again, I will sell you the plant at the price that I quoted you for the reverted plant, right? So I'm going to do my best to chop this guy up and get some variegation back, take you guys along for the journey. The journey may not be this entire video today. Today is probably just going to be the chopping up, and hopefully get some variegation back in this plant and yeah, sell it on. What do you reckon? So first things first, I think we're going to have to take this girl out. The root system I think looks pretty good. I think I actually transplanted these guys. Both these guys are doing really well. You can see these roots here too. These look like aerial roots to me that have come down the side and smashed into the side of the pots. But I think we're going to have to take this one out and then separate these two plants out. And I'm not sure whether or not to keep this tip cutting, I guess. We could potentially make multiple cuttings too and see what happens with this one, though again, based on the coloration on the stem on this side, I don't think we're going to get much out of that besides a green bud that activates and comes out of here. And that was one of the key things I will get into quickly before we dig in. When purchasing Albo cuttings, it's very important to have a look at the node out of the growth point, or on the side of the cutting rather. So if the growth point has popped, you can probably get an idea. If it is just a sort of growth point with no leaves and it looks green, you may want to have a bit of caution there, right? Because it could have just reverted straight away, especially when it's a half moon like this. But if you can, and if you're not sure, especially if there are blocky chunks of green like this on the plant, if it's really marbly, if it's something like this, you're probably not going to have to worry at all, because you can see everything is so mixed up here, the white and the green, that it's going to be so unlikely that a large chunk of green comes over the node on the next, the axillary bud on the next node that comes out here. It's so unlikely that you probably don't have to worry about it if it looks like this. But if it's sort of chunky and looks like this, and there are really large chunks of solid green, there could be a high chance of reversion, as we've seen. So it is very important to have a look at your nodes and see if you can see chunks of white, bits of white on the eye. So on that dot there, on that axillary bud, the growth point, the growing eye, you want white on the top of it, running through it. It's kind of, it should look like wagyu, right? If it is completely white, you're pretty much screwed, and if it is completely green, you're pretty much screwed. What you want is a mix, that candy cane kind of look over the top of it. So something that looks like these sort of different white flecks and green flecks over the top of the growth point. I'm seeing if I can find one here to show you on this plant. Bit of sawdust here from doing the spider mite treatment. I think these nodes are unfortunately kind of hidden away. You know what? Here's a good example. There's one right under there, and you can see there's a chunk of green, there's a chunk of white, and it is kind of speckly in each of those. So yeah, as I said, this one is a good contender, the other one, not so much. So when purchasing Albo cuttings, definitely do your due diligence. Just because the leaf looks really nice, it doesn't mean what comes out of the leaf will end up highly variegated like that original leaf. Okay, so be sure that you have a look at those nodes, the growth points, and make sure that there is sort of marbling across that section of the plant, that section of the stem. That's what matters. And it's the same thing. If you see a low variegation leaf that, say, it looks like this, right? But you see the node, and the node on it looks like the plant that I showed you just before. It looks like this. You've probably just found yourself a bargain, right? So they're the ones that you want to look for, because you will probably get them for a lower price if the person selling them doesn't realize that what really matters isn't the leaf that's being sold on the cutting, it is the node and the level of variegation over the node. And in layman's terms, with an Albo, which is chimeric variegation, you have two different genomes. One genome is the white genome that has no chlorophyll building genetics effectively in it, no genes that turn on and turn the chlorophyll production on. And the other genome has the normal plant genome that creates the chlorophyll in the leaves and on the plant. And so it doesn't matter if the leaf is completely green, if that chimeric variegation is over the top of the node. And effectively what you have there in that situation is the different cells, the sort of flesh of the plant, if you will, has a mix of those two different cell types, or those two different genomes that are sort of spread across the flesh there, the ones that produce chlorophyll, the ones that don't. So you want a mix of that over the top, or within probably as well, within the plant. You want a mix of those two genomes over the node, in the node, so that when that node activates and grows, it's going to carry those two genomes on into the rest of the plant. Okay, so long story short, do your due diligence, unlike me for this one apparently. And yeah, you should end up with some pretty cool plants. It's fun anyway. It's fun and it's interesting. So what am I going to do? I'm going to grab my excessively big potting, mixing soil tarp up and try and not tip over the camera. I think what I need to do is fold this part of it down and buzz this bit together. Okay, sweet. So here we are. And I'm just going to tip out the soil. I haven't watered this one in a few days, and she seems to be pretty thirsty, so I think the root system is actually going to be quite good. And I can already feel it's attached to the side of the pot here. Actually, it isn't too dry, so I'm just going to give it a tappy, 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 tap. And we'll have a look at what's going on down below. But yeah, I can see, so I think the thing that would have caught my eye originally with this cutting is that part of the stem does look really marbled. You know, this does look pretty good. However, when you get to the other side of it, and it's probably going to be a bit tricky for you to see because one, it's sort of calloused over and brown, and two, it's underneath the roots. But the other side of it down below behind here is largely green, which is correspondent, if you follow it up the stem, with the left side of the leaf, which is primarily green as well, and the right side is white. So yeah, okay, so this is the plant we've got. The good thing is we have a nice fat lush root on the top cutting that we will take off this thing, at least if I chop there. So we can probably plant this one up. It might be okay in soil. You might want to do it in another medium, like you might want to root it in water or whatever to get some secondary roots, because at the moment it is just this really fat aerial root that's gone down, dug into the soil. Or you might want to chuck it into moss. But that could be another thing that we have a look at. I could just chop this up. We can activate this node on this side and chuck it into soil and see if it survives. But what I am really keen to see, and hopefully now you'll be able to get a better look, it's going to be tricky to see, but under here I can see white flecking in that green. It's nowhere near as strong as, say, the other side of the stem here, but it does look somewhat promising, at least in comparison to this leaf. So I'm going to grab a razor blade and we're going to get chopping. So I'm just disinfecting this off camera, and might just bring a sort of disinfected surface down here to do the chopping on, as this mat is a bit filthy. I need to clean it up. So I'm going to shake this like a Polaroid picture until it dries out a bit with that alcohol. Now, what I'm going to do, so hopefully you can see what's going on. So the node is here, and I'm going to cut above that node. If I did below, one, this part of the plant would die because it has no other nodes to activate. So, well, it'll probably live for a while because it's got a root system and it can photosynthesize with this leaf, but it wouldn't grow, so it'd be screwed. And two, this node wouldn't necessarily activate, and it would probably be the higher one up, or if I leave this on there, the very tip of the plant, neither of these will do anything and this will just keep growing. So I'm going to seesaw above it. It's getting in there. There we go. Whew, nice clean cut with razor blade. You should be able to see the apical bud now. I'm not sure if it's in focus or not, but there is some white, especially above it, and I think a little bit on it. So I am still hoping something interesting happens. So I'm going to get my activated charcoal here and just pour out a tiny bit. In fact, you know what I could do, and this feels reminiscent of R-rated things. I'm going to get a little bit of it out here. I'm going to cut it into lines. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to spread it out a little bit. You know what, I probably could do that. And I'm going to just dip the cut into the charcoal like so, so that it comes out like that. And same thing on this one. Boop, 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 boop. Easy peasy. All right, same thing here. And just for funsies, I think we'll give this one chop too and see what happens with this node, and also see how easy it is to root the top part in water. Okay, so there's the top cutting with that tiny, tiny, tiny amount of variegation on it. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Actually, I'm not going to do that because it is very hard to get the angle right. So I'm going to have to pinch some and just spread it over the top. Okay, so it looks like that. And I think just because I'm lazy, I might just pot these two up together. It's going to be the easiest way to keep track of things. So forgive me for that, but Space is a premium at the moment. So, and I'm just going to use the same saw because, yeah, there's no real reason to change it up. What is that? Algae or something. All right, so I'm going to, again, in the name of saving space, cat's going crazy running around the house. So I'm going to pot the node up on the outside here, facing the outside of the pot, and I'm going to have the leaf trying to keep it sort of above the pot so that it's facing the light, as opposed to something like that where it's going to be a real pain in the butt to kind of deal with. I probably will have to stake this thing, so I might just leave it like, how am I going to do this? The root, I think, had gotten right to the bottom of the pot. All right, I think I might just, yeah, I guess I'll just sort of leave it how it was with that root touching the sides there. And with this one, sneak you in as well. And where is the growth point? The growth point is, all right, I want you facing up, and I want the leaf kind of facing up as well. And I kind of want the leaves facing in the same direction just to make it easier to face this guy towards the light too. So I think what I'm going to do is just set it up like that. All right, this is going to be a sort of hideous setup, but hopefully it will do the trick. I guess we'll see how we go. You guys will have to let me know what you reckon. The reason that I'm not really too worried about letting the wounds dry over for ages is that I'm going to keep them above the soil. And I've already chucked the charcoal on, so they should be fine. And again, if something does go wrong, it'll be a learning lesson. So what more can you ask for? I love when you do this. You take these out and then pot them back up with the soil that you used, and there seems to be way more soil than you originally had in the pot, or at least that's fitting back into the pot. You're kind of like, where'd all this extra soil come from? And then you realize there are all these air pockets hiding below the plant that you have to refill up. There's a huge one down here. Now I'm probably not going to water this one for a few days because the soil is somewhat damp, so it should be fine. It was probably watered several days ago. And I will deal with that when it looks like there is absolutely zero condensation on the inside of the pot. You can normally see it along the sides here. You'll see little bubbles of water kind of form. So I'm just giving the pot a kind of squish here to make sure that the soil has gotten down into all the crevices around the side. There's still a bit over here. Should do it when you do water it in the end. Okay. All right, now the other thing that I'm going to try and do is stake it up. And I'm looking to have a chopstick or something. I'm going to have to go find a stake of some kind. All right, so this one should do. So I might chuck it on this kind of side of the pot, way down to the bottom, and then grab some of this horticultural tape. And do I have scissors? Probably not. Trusting titanium knife out. And actually, I don't need you because this is recycled tape and it is the perfect length. All right, so what I'm going to do is just bring them around, kind of tape them up haphazardly. I don't know how high to get this. Maybe I'll bring it up a bit higher like that. It's a little uglier, but it's keeping them in place. And what I may need to do, because the shelf isn't high enough, is actually chop the top of this off. Okay. Okay, so that's all there really is to it. So I've got both sides of this cutting that I cut or this division rather, because it has roots. And I have potted it up, made sure that these are above the soil so that they hopefully don't get any kind of rot. With this one, the base of the plant is touching the soil, which is fine, but where I've cut it, that is above. Just going to try and chuck a bit more of this back into the pot. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. It'll probably be 3 or 4 months before we have any leaves out, but it'll be quite interesting to see the kinds of leaves we get out, and hopefully it helps you guys learn a bit more about what to do or what's happening when plants revert, what to do when they have reverted and you know, want to be able to save them and hopefully get back your variegation. And yeah, it's going to be a learning experience for me as well, because this is the first time I've had to deal with an Albo completely reverting and giving me it, albeit a beautiful Monstera leaf, right? Like, it's nothing to sniff at. I wouldn't be sad if I grow this out and it ends up being a plant. It is still very pretty, but yeah. So I'm going to chuck this one in water too and just let it do its thing. Chuck this one back on the shelf, and I will keep you guys updated in a few months. I guess I'll wait until something interesting happens. The only other thing to mention is that I might chuck a little bit of moss around this root, because I can see that it is sort of fluffy and above the soil there. And I saw also that this plant had some roots poking up right at the edge of the pot there, at the surface of the pot. So I might just chuck some moss around the top of it. But yeah, besides that, thanks for joining me. Check out this video and I'll see you next time.